Welcome back to The Belonging Place, where we talk about community and connection and belonging. And I'm really excited to have my guest here. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
And tell us who you are.
Yeah, my name is Chandler Rogers.
Okay.
I am the founder of Relay.
Okay.
Relay is a addiction recovery platform. We help men and women dealing with compulsive sexual behavior to find healing and connection.
Okay. That was a great elevator pitch. Very, very, we're going to dig into this, but tell us about you.
It's interesting that you asked that because I feel like my identity has been so swept up in what I'm doing the last few years. And when you asked me to come on the podcast, I'm like, man, I need to think about my life more deeply and like, who am I? And yeah, even how I introduce myself is like, this is some other context. I have a 1-year-old at home right now. So we just had our first baby. My wife and I have been married for 5 years.
Okay.
And so I'm at a stage of life where things feel really busy and I'm still trying to figure out like what do I want to be, what do I want to do, how can I give of my strengths and myself to the world. But at my core, I would say I am just a normal guy who's trying to do some good and make it through the day to day.
Yeah, dad.
Yeah.
Husband.
Husband.
Right? And I would guess this, Chandler, I would guess that before, what's your son's name?
Psalm.
There's I love that.
Yeah.
There's a before Psalm and there's a now, right?
Yeah.
And you're probably a different person and in the way that you see and interact with the world. And there was probably a before your wife too, right? Like, this is what I'm doing company wise or school wise. Talk to me about that shift of like what I want to give to the world, and like the world is actually just like right in your home.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there were a lot of things, I think, before Psalm came into my life, before my wife Jade came into my life. I grew up the oldest of 5 kids. My family and I, we moved around pretty often. My dad changed jobs. And so I think I lived in 7 different states before I graduated from high school.
Okay.
And I think I always saw myself as somebody that could kind of almost mesh and blend into a variety of different pockets. Like, I played the piano, so like music I was always drawn to. Athletics, like basketball was one of my favorite sports growing up. I had family in Arizona, and so I loved the Phoenix Suns. And I wanted to be exactly like Steve Nash when I was older.
Okay.
And I was always this like small kid, and so I was out there like practicing basketball every day. But then I also loved to learn. I loved school. I loved math. I just remember feeling like I had all of these interests. And then in terms of my friend group, the people that I connected with, I feel like they were all very different. And moving around a lot, I think it was kind of a cool thing. Like, I enjoyed that diversity, the variety of getting to meet a bunch of different people and to have friends that were like, call them like studious. I don't want to say nerds.
Yeah.
Like, they were
come on.
academically inclined nerds, and like friends that were like the jocks, or friends that were like very musical, or like friends from church. And I think there was kind of this like strength to that. And there was also this side of like, I think figuring out who I am was always a little tough for me, if I'm just being totally transparent.
Yeah.
I think maybe you can sense as I'm introducing myself, like the narrative for who I am and how my life has been hard for me to kind of figure out, because it's very fluid. It feels like there's a lot of pieces to it, and I don't overly identify with just one of them.
Yeah.
And so almost kind of everything and nothing all at the same time, but feeling like I just generally enjoy a lot of different these parts of my life, and I enjoy a lot of different people too.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a rich part of life.
Let me give you, I'm going to do something that's like very therapy of me, but like, I'm going to be permission giving for you to look at that narrative in a different way than you just said.
Okay.
So we're going
Let's do it. Let's make this a therapy session.
No, we're not going to do therapy. But what I want to say is, what if instead of like, I don't really know who I am because I belong, or like in a lot of places, like that is your identity. Like,
yeah,
I have a skill set because I like moved around a lot to make and let go. Cause there's both, right? Like, you can make friends, but you can also let go of friends. And that is loss and connection over and over and over. So like, if you can sustain that, because some people have a really hard time sustaining that, right? They don't want to move because they don't want to let go and they don't want to make new friends.
Right.
That's like its own skill set. And I would also, we're going to talk a lot about something you're hyper focusing on in your life right now. I would say if your passion and your drive is in one area and that's maybe not your identity, but it's something you're really passionate about, then I think it's really healthy outside of that to be really creative and diverse so that you can put energy into that one place and receive energy in all the other places,
That's
right?
interesting. I never thought about that. Almost like, yeah, having that diverse, broad spectrum of interests and areas maybe that I think for me, it's where I draw energy from is kind of
Yes.
this variety of places. Like I can get really into college football in the fall, but I do not identify with like football as my identity and
Yeah.
like, year round type of thing. And I could give a bunch of other examples, but allowing me to, yeah, go really deep in this maybe 80% of my life on one area.
And
That
I would
that's
say
really
that
interesting.
diversity fuels. I'm often when people are like talking or coming up to me and talking about, I'm like really love entrepreneurship, creativity. I like people who want to start something that matters, right? Blake Mikowski, who started Tom's, wrote a book about start something that matters. I love this. I love people who are like, I don't necessarily have to have a degree or I don't necessarily have to have permission, but I have an idea. And if it's a good enough idea and I can get people to fund me and I can get people like start saying, but in the incubator stage of that or in the like seeking to understand, people will often have this conundrum about like, how do I pay my bills? And how do I like serve this purpose? Sometimes this is a passion or a hobby, sometimes this is a whatever. And I've always been a big fan of saying like, well, you have to pay the bills. You have to take care of your family. Maslow's hierarchy needs says this, you got to feed yourself,
The
you got
most
to
basic
fuel
needs.
yourself, you got to
Yeah.
like have somewhere to sleep, right? So I think we're lucky if we get to do that by a passion that we love,
Mm,
right? Even if we're like
totally.
pushing a rock uphill, right? But not everyone gets to do that. And so for some people, I think it's okay. And I've talked to a lot of my friends about like, you can punch the clock at work. This is an old term for old people where you're like,
What's
right?
that? What does that mean?
You can just do a job to do a job. No, I'm not saying people should be miserable. There's enough variety in jobs. Do a job that you at least like have some curiosity about, but it doesn't have to be your passion, right? It can pay the bills. And then I definitely think if you're doing that, you should have a passion project or a side project, or everyone's about side hustles these days, right? I don't even think you should do it for free. Like get paid to do it. And when this thing is making you enough or better, then you can let this thing go.
Right.
But there's some people that want to do this thing without this thing and it causes a lot of problems in their relationships, and so I'm not trying to say one is right or the other, but I definitely think if you're working, especially on an entrepreneur, on a business that, you have to bootleg or you have to get venture capital, whatever, if you're trying to do all these things, I think there is something to be said about being able to step away from that thing and have a variety of like creativity, diversity, passion, connection that's fueling you. I think it would be I think it is very difficult to the degree that I think some CEOs and C-suite and startups, if they don't have that, we find high levels of suicide. We actually find that stress of doing the thing and then nowhere to release that
Mm,
stress or to build
yeah.
connection causes this like really lonely at the top
Mm,
feeling. So
totally.
yeah,
Yeah, it was interesting. The very first startup that I ever worked at, I can go into what it is if that's interesting,
yeah,
but
yeah.
it the story that I wanted to tell that reminded me as you were talking, my mentor, my boss, he was the CEO and the founder of the company. He had started a few startups prior to the one that he was
Mhm.
currently doing, and he had invited me to come out, and I was an intern for the summer, and I ended up working there for a couple years, and that's where I really found my love for startups and
Okay.
building products that solve meaningful problems. And yeah, I think I developed maybe this, I don't know, high bar of like I actually do want my career to be stuff that I find like very
Yes.
passionate and very exciting. But I was kind of asking him because I knew that he was like basically giving a lot of himself and his life to his company, to the startup, and he had done this for years. And he had little kids at the time, and he was very active in his faith community and other things. And I'm like, how do you do this? How are you
Yeah.
surviving? And he's like, I actually, he's like, a lot of people talk about finding hobbies outside of work, finding other sources of passion to kind of balance. He's like, for me, I tried that for a while, but I realized that I was able to kind of make work feel like it was my passion
Mm,
project, and I had to make work truly be my hobby.
mm.
But obviously, he was getting paid for this.
Yeah, yeah.
It was a startup. But I think what it kind of made me like think about was like he's seeking that connection and purpose through his work. He wasn't just like kind of grinding, putting his nose down
Yes.
and like, taking all of that pain and enduring, the many long hours that it takes to like build a startup, but he was like trying to intentionally craft his work experience and the people on his teams in such a way that he could meet some of those core needs of connection and belonging and purpose. And that was really inspiring to me. And that reflected in how he talked to the whole company about the mission and the values. And I think, values are something in a lot of
Yes.
companies that are kind of fluffy, they're words on a wall. But I really bought into and believed and could feel the deep connection as he would talk about um, the values of what we were trying to do, because I could see that it was really about his personal values. And he was trying to, I think there wasn't a huge separation between work and how he got his needs met. It was like, it was kind of inspiring to make me think, can I, maybe my career doesn't just have to be separate from
Yes. My
like
passion
my
project.
passion. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say this. I've talked a few times about Telos, but one of the things that, and I stayed there for almost 8 years, which is the longest I've worked anywhere.
Wow.
And I think just long for anybody these
Yeah,
days.
that's impressive.
One of the reasons why is you just hit it. So Telos is a mental health organization, residential, but it is owner operated. And so business wise, right? So which was wild. So they have skin in the game, right? They put the money down, they've done the thing. And they believed in the mission statement so much that everybody needed to memorize it. And at any point, if anybody were to ask you, stop you in the hallway, like you needed to know it. It was not just like something that you, and in every like formal meeting that we had, it needed to be on the agenda.
Hmm.
Somebody had to say it
Wow.
memorized. And so the amount of times you can imagine in 8 years and how many meetings, because I ended up being in leadership, right? That I was hearing or saying the mission statement was wild.
Yeah.
And I was
Wow.
like, why doesn't everybody do this? Like, why is not this the model? We also did these trainings, drip down trainings every week about our 10 pillars that we had, our values. And somebody was training. And so those 10 pillars, every 10 weeks for 8 years, I got trained on those 10 pillars. It is so important that people understand, right? Like we work with people, so our clients were kids, right? They were kids that had, or young adults that had gaming addiction or had process addiction or had autism, or like we were holding part of their lives and their parents' lives in our hands in their trajectory. So it was important that we focus on our clients, but it was interesting to me that Telos had this very strong belief in ultimate potential, and they meant everybody.
Hmm.
If there's a seat for you to be on that's different than you're on the bus, we can move you. If we have filled you with all the things that you need, we hate to see you go, but we want to blow wind in your sails. There was not a scarcity mentality of pouring into people and then having them go somewhere else. It was like we
That's
believe
really
so
cool.
much in what we have. We want to send out people who have this philosophy. I think I'm agreeing with you. I think there's no right way to do life, but I definitely think wherever you choose to spend a lot of your time, like that choice of how you interact with the people you interact with or the product or the thing that you're doing has a cost, right? And I don't mean like bad, I mean good or bad. There's a cost benefit analysis, right? Like, and I think
Totally.
it's,
Finding your why, renewing that why every
yeah.
single day.
And if you
So
can't find your
important.
why there, I think you have to find it somewhere else, right? But like, thankfully, I think we live in a world where you can either create your why or you can find someone who like shares that.
Hmm.
I love this. So speaking of this, speaking of why, I'm going to make a little transition. I want to talk to you a little bit about your like relay. I want you to talk about the Y Combinator. For those who don't even know what that is, I'm just
Mhm.
throwing that out there. I want you to talk a little bit about Sandbox. Maybe the easiest way for you to do that is just take us on a journey of like why
My
relay and
story. Yeah.
just go through. Is that
Yeah, I
cool?
think that I let's do it.
Okay.
I started Relay because I had personally struggled with pornography for many years. Very common among teenage boys and
Hmm.
teenagers in
Hmm.
general, not just boys but girls as well. I was exposed when Instagram was kind of early on and on the rise, and it was never something that I went seeking for. It kind of like found me, and I had conversations in my house about it, right? But I think just, the curiosity and growing up in those early teenage years, I think I was about 14. So, freshman or sophomore year in high school, I was just curious. And I think so I was new at high school, right? And had just moved from Wisconsin, Green Bay, Wisconsin. I'm
Okay.
trying to remember the timeline
The
right now.
7 moves.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I was in Washington State, in Gig Harbor for high school, and trying to fit in, trying to figure out what I was going to do. I'd always identified with basketball growing up, but I was kind of getting into running and track and cross country, and so it's kind of switching like the
And the
focus
Pacific
of
Northwest
sports.
is very run and
Yes,
track and field.
it
I'm from
is.
Portland, so
Okay,
yeah,
yes, absolutely. It was very competitive, but I had always enjoyed running too since I was young, and my parents, who hate running, were like, why
Where
does
did
our
this come
child
from?
like running? We don't know. But so I was trying to figure out, yeah, who am I going to be, in my high school years. And I think looking back, I can see why, pornography kind of came in as kind of maybe a way to try to meet some needs that I maybe wasn't aware of. But I realized that it was something that it wasn't helping me feel like my best self.
Mm.
There was kind of a religious, moral component, hearing in church growing up, like, okay, this is like, there's that side of it. But I was starting to see, I think being the oldest of 5 kids, whether it was academics or sports or music, I felt like I could always put my mind to anything I wanted to achieve and make it happen.
Mhm.
Like on the outside, I think people saw me as fairly successful, or like I could,
Very
get good
resilient.
grades
Yeah.
or perform well. Um, but then all of a sudden there's this one behavior in my life that I couldn't stop. And that, I think it was the fact that I didn't feel in control. I couldn't stop
The
it.
willpower is
The
not
willpower,
enough, right?
yeah.
It's like,
I think it created this shame spiral and continued to make me feel more and more frustrated with myself, more and more like I wasn't satisfied with my life, and it was being defined by this one area that was very secret, and it was something I hadn't talked to anyone about. Um, to kind of fast forward, I ended up eventually opening up and finding a group that was local, run by a therapist over Zoom. And I was actually very willing to step into that group because I think I had known for a while that I couldn't do this alone. And I was so frustrated by this feeling of, I think it unveiled to me that there was kind of this identity of like, I'm an achiever. I can do good things, or like I'm a good person maybe. And this was threatening that identity and creating all this shame. And so I was like, I'm going to put myself in an environment where I can get that support and I don't know what I thought it was going to give me at the time. I don't know if it was accountability or like, but I was generally open-minded. I was like, I'm kind of surrendering and realizing I need help and I
yeah.
can't do this on my own. And stepping into that group for the first time was powerful, because I remember distinctly like what I was expecting in terms of who is going to be in this type of
Yeah, of
group,
course.
who struggles with this type of thing, because it wasn't ever going to be me. I think I viewed myself as maybe above that.
Yeah, these
in
aren't
a
going to
way,
be
which,
my peers or people that I
yeah,
like or
you're right,
that
or that I would
yeah.
hang out with that are cool or going places in their life. Which, looking back, that it sounds cringy to me. I'm like that feels so like, wow, I can totally see where my mindset
But
had been
this
affected.
I just want to stop a few times in this
Sure.
and say, this is a common belief about people, that they think that like
Well, that person
they
must
walk
not
in the
struggle
room,
with X, Y, or
yes,
Z. Yeah,
and or they have a concept of who else struggles with whatever. I'm
whatever
talking
it
about
is. Yeah.
addiction in general. These people have disordered eating. These people have this people has a gaming, and you think that there's a certain type because you see it in the movie or the trope.
Oh, totally.
And you walk in the room and they're your neighbors and they're your bishops and they're your, leaders of they're like
the
whatever.
people who seem like they have a normal
that
life.
have it
Yeah.
all together, or
Yeah.
even the people who seemingly you would never think about it because they have their life seemingly together, right? They're like a producers is what I call it, right? Okay, so you step in a room, you think it's
Yeah.
going to be a bunch of other kinds of people, and you
They're
see
pretty
yourself
normal and cool
reflected.
people. Yeah, and I'm like, it wasn't necessarily that I would like be best friends with these people. Like, they were
Yeah.
definitely different. And they were different ages too. So this was,
Right.
I think, a young adult group, like 18 to 25 ish. And but generally, I was like, man, all these people have like pretty big ambitions for who they're trying to be. And I could see also when other people were sharing, I could hear the way that they viewed themselves. It was often like this self-loathing and just this intense disappointment or frustration with themselves. And man, as I was listening to those guys sharing, I was like, well, dude, obviously that's not true. Like I wanted to kind of be like, no, like you.
So much
That's
easier to tell
not-
somebody else
Exactly.
than to tell yourself.
But then that started to uncover like maybe I'm seeing myself the wrong way, or it was maybe bringing awareness to the layers of pain and wounding and shame that I hadn't fully understood. And I'm talking as if I'd figured it all out now. This has been a long journey for me, and
Yeah.
this was over 10 years ago. So I'm uh, I guess aging myself a little bit. I'm still young, right? But I think
Yeah.
that over the last decade, it's come in layers. But since the very beginning, I realized that there's something interesting about being in a place where you can be vulnerable about some of the things that other people wouldn't suspect about you.
I
And it's
call
not
them
just
your
this place to be
unspeakable
like,
things. Yeah.
hello, I'm an addict, but rather to be like, to kind of expose, yeah, the lies or the things that I've been grappling with internally, and to see other people doing that the same and bringing it to light, and realizing that with that light, it almost kind of melts away some of those misconceptions, some of those layers that had built up, and it just created a ton of motivation for me to just continue to, I think, focus on this with a more healthy lens. Like, it's not just about, it wasn't about porn. Like, it quickly changed from I want to quit porn to I think there's things I need to heal about myself, or things like I need to discover and learn more about myself. I think that was a powerful
Kind of
shift.
a root issue versus like what I call branches, or the thing that
Totally.
brings you
The
to the table,
symptoms.
right?
Yeah.
Can we back up just a little bit? I find it kind of remarkable, Chandler, that at a young age you were so willing to step into something that, like, obviously, as we talk more and unfold, I would say a big pivotal moment in your life. What do you think contributed, besides just that you were like willing, you said, but like
Why was I
what do
willing?
you what do you think contributed to your ability to do something like that?
Hmm.
Which then kind of changed your life. Like not just about
Yeah.
porn, but like about the way that your brain started to conceptualize what I would call belonging and connection. But like what when you look back, are there any things that specifically you think contributed to that? Just for listeners that are like trying to create a space where this can happen, either as parents or whatever, right? I'm just
Yeah.
curious.
It's hard because, I mean, in my work now with Relay, I see men and women come into our program who have a similar story to me, but are 30, 40, 50 years into the struggle, and never felt like they could step into this type of place because of the fear, the shame, or like the fear of consequences too. Like, I'm
Yeah.
already married, I don't want to blow up my relationship, or um, a number of different
I don't want my
things.
parents to know because then I'm gonna have to talk to some ecclesiastic person, or I don't want them to see me. I'm the oldest in my
Yeah.
family. Like I have to be good, or
Yeah.
like
I think there's always the temptation with whatever it is of like the insidious lies. Maybe I can continue to figure it out on my own. Like, this next time, like, I think I can, if just with a little bit more effort, a little bit more fine tuning, I can figure it out. It feels so much safer than to be like, surrender. Maybe I can't figure it out. Cause that's kind of what it feels like, is saying, I maybe can't figure it out. And I don't, whether you view yourself as a high achiever, or whatever your
yeah,
personality is, I think as human beings,
we want to solve our
we want to
problems.
feel in
Oh
control.
yes,
I think it makes us feel kind of unsafe
and we have so
to
much shame on top of that.
yeah.
Like the shame and the need to be controlled just keeps us. Yeah. So yeah. What?
So how
What?
how did
Yeah. And it doesn't
I'll
have to
give
be
I'll,
anything miraculous. I'm
I
just curious if you look around. Is it your parents?
I
Is it
will say,
your
I think my mom did create an environment where she did ask me one night. She was like, I feel like I should ask you how pornography has been for you. Like, assuming that I'd probably been exposed, I think she was like, is this something that you've come across? Like, we had talked about this in family
right,
discussions, as
right.
porn is bad. But this was
Yeah.
more of just like she was coming from a lens of
Curiosity.
curiosity. It wasn't like,
Love this.
are you struggling and doing bad things? And instead it was like, I think she felt maybe in her heart like something was going on. And I wear my heart on my sleeve as part of the answer to the
Yeah.
question of, I think my wife would probably attest to this. Like, when I'm
Yeah.
not doing well, like, I think there is maybe, I don't know where I learned this, but I feel like I wear some of that authenticity of, I think it is a little bit harder for me to keep those things secret. I don't like it.
Yeah.
Maybe that is because I deep down know that I just want to be seen, and I'd rather be seen than to only be known for this surface level part of me. Like,
The whole of you.
I
Yeah.
think I'm more okay with being seen for the brokenness too, rather than like to not feel seen, and to have it only be these partial parts.
Yeah. And I don't know about you and your experience, but in my experience, those, I'm going to use your words, those broken parts are the parts that are the most connecting to
Yeah.
other people. Right?
100%. I think that's what I've become passionate about, and maybe that's that was the pivotal point in my life. Is I think it was a very positive experience, not just like being on. I chose to be honest, and I shared with my mom what had been going on. I was like a senior in high school at this point, and then later she had actually come across, hey, there's like this group run by this therapist. You don't have to do this. Like she didn't force it
It was an
upon me.
invitation.
She kind of was like, hey, I came across this. I'm like, let's do it. Like I want to do that, and because I was thinking about my future. I was about to leave the house and figure out what I was going to do with my life, and um, so maybe that the timing had to do with that too. Like
Timing,
I
I would say the
was
safe place to land, the fact that curiosity rather than coming from a blame or shame. It sounds like to me the reception of what you said was held. Like your mom just kind of held
totally,
it, didn't
and
like
then
alarmingly like, oh my gosh.
100%. And stepping into group though too, I think it created this positive feedback cycle of like, to go back to this conversation about the broken parts being the most connecting. I think I felt probably more connection than I actually had in my life as I started to go through my own recovery journey in this process, because I was exposing these broken,
Yeah,
vulnerable parts, and
we know this, right?
it allowed other people to connect with me
Yeah,
in a
Brene
deeper
Brown
way.
has said vulnerability begets vulnerability, right?
Totally.
She's like the queen of this, and like we know this, right? And it's not just in addiction; it's really in anything. If you can like open up, and you can open up, hopefully, and hopefully the first time it's not always the case, safe enough, and not only do you feel seen and heard, but like so much shame is like whisked away, and the ability to be like, that person didn't disintegrate. They didn't like,
You're right.
they
Yeah.
didn't look at me and like walk out of the room. They don't see me as the problem. I've never been the worst part of me to them. So like, but I think that, it's the spot. It's like when
Right.
you're a kid and you
That's
have
what you think about. Yeah.
the like a zit, and you think everyone can see it, but everyone else has their own zit. So nobody cares about yours, right?
Totally.
But we get to this place, I think. And so you're sitting in a place and you're exposing, I call them your unspeakable things, the things you can't really say, right? And you're finding connection and belonging, and you're finding, well, accountability and other things. Okay, so you're in the group.
Yeah.
It's a great experience for you.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was a learning process, right? To figure out, again, going back to like, I didn't have a porn problem. I had a pain problem.
Yeah.
And what does that mean? I felt like I had a pretty good upbringing, great parents, great family system. But I think as I studied my story more, and this wasn't, by the way, realizations in my first year. This is kind
Right.
of my blended reflection looking back on all of the
Yeah,
years.
of course.
I think it was starting to take a more curious stance towards my life story, and to realize that everything we're talking about isn't an addiction thing. This is a human thing. We all have brokenness, and we all find ways to behaviorally cope with life. Like whether those are like big things that cause a lot of apparent harm and damage in our lives and our relationships, or things that are maybe more subtle under the surface. Like, whether that's adapting and learning like, hey, I can, scroll on TikTok for a couple hours every night, and that feels like a way to get my needs met. And then I start to realize, maybe there's some deeper things going on. That's like
The numbing, right?
the
I always
numbing
tell
and the
people
escaping.
the
and-
maladaptive
Right.
behaviors are so much easier than healthy coping skills. It's
Totally.
just like it's so much cheaper to buy not good food than it is to buy good food, right? This is the same way.
And that, I think that's kind of to move forward in the story. That's what I realized. I was more willing to be open with my story with friends and other people as I moved into college in the next years of my life. I had found that almost everybody I talked to and was open with about my story was basically like me too, whether it was specifically with like I
Right.
dealt with porn addiction and it's like really impacting me, or other things, right?
Screen addiction,
But just
gaming
seeing
addiction,
seeing the
gambling.
pattern of like these maladaptive, escaping, numbing, coping strategies to try to meet core underlying needs. And what I've become passionate about, I know what we're so excited to talk about in this episode, is like the core, most
Yes.
fundamental need is connection. It is to
Tell me
feel
about this.
seen,
Dig
known,
in.
loved. Well, so how did relay come into the picture?
Yeah.
Let's jump there. So I was in a class while I was at college, and I was basically, the prompt of the class, was a computer science class, was to build an app, whatever you want. That was actually it. It was just build an app and you get credit for it.
Is this
And-
exciting to you, by the way, this prompt? Because when I
Oh,
hear that
100%.
prompt, my brain goes berserk and goes, It's too
Yes.
ambiguous. It's like an artist with the like a canvas. They love it. They're like, and I just think, no, 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 no. I need a stencil, which is funny because in other ways I'm really creative, but this is like a very
It's
open
very open.
question.
Yeah. Well, I had been this coincides with when I was working at my first startup, Handled,
Okay.
which by the way I didn't explain earlier, but they were focused in the moving industry on how do you help people who are moving across states to have a more modern moving experience. Like
Okay.
normally to get your stuff moved, you have to have somebody come to your home with a clipboard and survey all of your stuff so that they know the weight and therefore they can give you a quote and price it. And then, man, having moved a lot, there's a lot of things that can go wrong and friction
Yes.
points. And so this company was a tech startup that was like, how do we kind of modernize that and apply software to kind of smooth that over? So I was kind of like passionate about that because I had moved a lot and I thought it was really cool. And I thought the founder, the CEO that I reported to, that did a great job at like creating this vision. It wasn't just about moving, it was helping the world feel more at home. So
Yeah.
it's really
Ooh,
focused on how do we
love that.
create this powerful experience. People's lives are moving when they move. It's not just their stuff. How do we help take care of them in this time of their life? And so I really connected again with like this idea of building technology to solve problems that matter. And so when I heard this prompt, my mind immediately went to my story with addiction, and I had been talking to a lot more people openly, and this theme of isolation had come up so
Oh,
often.
gosh. Okay.
And how many people I talked to who had not joined a group, who had never like gotten a real support system, and maybe I was the first person that they were like saying something about it to and being honest with. And so I just was thinking a lot about, man, I wish there was an easier way to help people, like removing the friction to find other people who are in the same boat, to get matched together and to create a healthier sense of accountability and connection. And so that was the early version of Relay. It was, and I had used some of the other like apps and tools out there for addiction recovery. But the goal for Relay was always like, what if it was group based? What if we matched people into these tight knit teams, is what we've called them, of like 7 or 8 other people, and you can choose to stay anonymous. So like if I'm not comfortable going to an in-person 12-step group, for example, at a local church basement or something, I don't have to show my face here. Like I can use
Yeah.
just my first name, and I don't have to put a real profile picture, but I can still kind of be seen and known more fully. I think
And I
that
can grow into that if I want. I can start
totally,
anonymous. I can
yes.
feel comfortable enough that I can then
I didn't
step up.
expect that, but that's totally what's happened over the last 5 years with Relay. We see
Really?
people like they come in, they want to be a little bit more anonymous, and then very quickly they don't really care. Like that fear, I think the fear melts away when they
I also
realize
want to
that
say this. There's something about if other people in there are giving their face and their name
yeah,
and you're very open to each other, right? Like there is an invitation, but there's also sort of like there's sort of this bravery, right? Of other people being like, and I think that
it's
that's
very
an
encouraging.
invitation
It
to
is
you
like
to,
Brené's
to let
Brown.
go of this need to be like anonymous. Like you can be your whole person, even in this group, right?
Totally. Yeah. I think I was wrong about that early on. Like I thought that the key was like it's gonna be really anonymous, and it still can be if you want, but I totally think that's it. I think people actually want real connection. They just need to feel safe and have the right environment
And
where
you're creating safety pods. I'm
yeah,
teams, right?
sure.
Like in essence, they aren't anonymous. I mean, they can come in and be anonymous because they're in Relay, right? And then if they choose, this is what I like, choice. I'm a big fan. I'm working now a lot in trauma, and the key element of trauma is choice, right?
Mm,
And I think people that have addictions are coming from trauma in relationships,
yeah.
trauma in, like you said, pain points, right? If we
Yeah.
really go down to pain points rather than the thing. And I think they need choice. So I love this. Okay, so you're sitting in the class, they say do the app. You
So I learned to code in this class. I
okay.
had not, just to be clear, I was not like a software developer. My friend in this class, who we ended up becoming co-founders together, I pitched him on the
Is
idea.
this Jace?
This is Jace.
Okay.
Yes. And I was like, hey man, like I've got this idea, I don't know if you can relate to this. And he was actually like, I haven't like dealt with this personally, but like I think it sounds really meaningful. Let's do it. So I just want to give Jace a shout out. He was always very like he saw the real need to
Yeah.
help people who are dealing with really difficult struggles to feel like they can find stronger support systems and
Yeah.
to get the right tools and in the right environment. So yeah, we started
Why
working on this.
Relay though?
So
The name.
the name.
Yeah.
It was actually not Relay
Oh,
early
okay.
on, but that's a whole nother story. We don't need to go down that road. But
Okay.
why Relay to me? We ended up landing on that because I ran track and field in a relay race was interesting. I ran the 4x8, so the 800 was like my
Oh, this
race,
is the
and the
hardest
4x4.
race.
Oh yeah, 800 and 400. The truth. If you're
I
listening to this
won.
podcast,
It's actually like the easiest of those.
I mean, no, respect to everyone in all the events, but
Yes.
yeah, no, in track it's like you are running your individual leg. It is a personal effort that you have to put out there, but it is ultimately a team effort, and you cannot do it alone. And I feel like that was perfect
wondering
for
if this was
recovery.
this. I didn't know, but
Yeah.
I was like, man, if this is a track nod, I love this more than anything.
It is. It's a nod to relay races and realizing like, yes, this is especially like for somebody coming from the point of feeling like they are alone and they have been dealing with this alone. It is a deeply personal thing. And in relay, there is still absolutely that individual component of helping you do that deeper work that is personal to you. But we're doing this in this group environment, in this team environment. It's easier when we run together. So
Yeah. Okay, so you and Jace are doing relay.
yep.
And then what opportunities do you guys like get yourselves involved in that sort of help this?
Yeah. Yeah. How does it go from there? I mean, so he actually had a job offer to go work at Apple. And
Okay.
so early on, it was not like we're going to build this company. And it was really like a class project. And I had a job offer too once we graduated. But we ended up, the timing, I'll just kind of,
Yeah.
so this was actually the end of our junior year, but going into our senior year, we got connected with this program at BYU called Sandbox.
Okay.
Sandbox was now a whole year. It wasn't just one class where you could work on a startup and get credit towards your major. So I was a business major and he was a computer science major. And so we had kind of gotten the start in our initial computer science class. We had built an early prototype. We did a few competitions and we won like a few $1,000s so we could like set up the basic like database
Right.
and things like that and test it out. But we actually literally went around and put a bunch of flyers up everywhere, and it was kind of just like, you know, struggling alone with porn, like get a group here. And we were like, we'll see if people actually are willing to like jump into this thing. But we had so many people sign up and so many people willing. We actually used something called Slack before we had built the app. We put people into private
Slack
Slack
user.
channels, and that was our beta test. It was
Okay.
like we put them in private Slack channels, and we had these like bots, which were really just us behind the scenes sending prompts like every day to like fuel discussion topics. And people loved it. And so simultaneously we were building the app, and a few months later we got involved with Sandbox. So now we had a whole year to like go deeper. We had
And was
this
Sandbox
positive.
new when you
It was
guys?
the very first
Okay,
year.
because this is
Yeah.
what I think I read or like when I
Yes,
did
we
some
were
research on you.
One of the very first
You're
companies.
like,
yeah.
Okay, so for those people who don't even know, Sandbox is what? It's a class.
It's like it's a program. It's a cross-disciplinary program at BYU that so designers can participate. If you're in the graphic design program, software developers in computer science, business majors in the business school.
Bring all these people together.
Yeah, and you form your own teams. You figure out your own ideas. So we had kind of had our own idea. Like we had started Relay, so we were unique in that sense of we already kind of had like our team, me and Jace, and we knew that we wanted to build this thing, and we had some progress, and we actually launched the app like at the beginning of the school year when most people were just in Sandbox starting and forming teams and
So you're
forming
kinda like in
ideas.
beta.
So we had a little head
Okay.
start. But yeah, for our entire year, senior year, last year of school, we really just had the chance to take this initial, like it was now out there, and we had a couple hundred people, I think, using it. It was free, and we were just trying to learn like what actually works. Could we actually help people find effective accountability and help them work through the shame and create the environment that would actually be approachable and be effective and ultimately help them heal. And we realized it was a lot harder than we thought it was going to be. But
which is common and normal, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's like, I just want to say to people that start something that matters, I call it building a train. And sometimes you're building the train while it's going on the track.
100%.
And I just want to
It
say,
feels sometimes like
it's
an
worthy.
airplane where you're falling through the air and you're
Yeah.
trying to put the pieces
But
together.
like such a worthy thing. I mean, I think we're never gonna not have people that want to do this, but I just want to shout out to being resilient in the process, right? Like it's not
It was scary.
It's not a
Yeah.
linear progress. It's like
No.
back and forth, and I say the do-si-do and 10 steps forward and 2 steps back. And
Yeah, because there was some early things that worked initially, but then there was like, okay, I think, like for example, we didn't have any content or curriculum, or there was no program. It was just really an app that puts you in a group.
Yeah.
And we realized that a lot of the groups like started off really strong and died out after a couple days, which was kind of normal too for apps where people are like very fickle with our attention span and our dopamine. It's like, all right, this was interesting for a day and moving on. So there was a lot of just challenges, even just like from a building a product that is sticky and engaging, of like, how do we help people form habits to actually do hard things, like,
Mm.
taking care of your sleep and your, your other needs. We believe strongly at Relay that self-care is like a huge part of recovery. It's not just unwanted behaviors. It's pursuing
We also
healthy.
believe that. I'm just kidding. I
Yes.
believe this.
No, I mean, it's not unique to us. It,
It's one of my favorite things about the building blocks of Relay, though, when I was doing my research and looking at it, and besides this topic that brings us to the table together about connection and belonging, I was like, oh man, you guys have built it with the right, what I would call like core or root issues, or
yeah, we're trying to take a
the
very
building
holistic.
blocks.
Yeah, it
Even
is a
a
holistic.
group of 6, 7 to 8, 8 in a therapeutic world is about where you can get your best. You get beyond that,
Yeah,
it's
a little
hard.
tough.
You get below that, it's hard. So like
Mm.
even at the numbers, as I was like, oh man, they are
Which we had to learn that too. We
doing
did
good
not
work.
know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so we had this looming choice though of, okay, so we have these job offers, and the plan for all of us was going to be to go work full time and get paid a normal salary.
Yeah, of course.
And we had a couple other people on the team through Sandbox that were with us, and so this was kind of a tough thing for all of us as the year was going on. We were hoping to see some clear indication of this is really taking off and it's going to work from a business perspective, work from it's actually helping people perspective. People actually want this.
Because sometimes those are hard to go
It's very
together,
hard.
right? To make money on the thing that's good, and in the world, especially I would say in mental health, right? There's sort of this notion that you should just help people for free.
And we like, if you look at all of the reviews on Relay that are not like 5 stars, most of them are like, why is this not free, you evil people? And I'm like, man, trust me, if number one, if it were effective to do it free, we would. But we found when it was free that like people could get into groups so easily. It was almost like awkward, like people that maybe weren't super serious about this. So from a safety perspective, we're like, maybe there should be some like commitment to actually
I
join
call
a
that
group.
skin in the
And
game. You gotta
you
have
have to have
skin in the
skin in the
game.
game. Well, I put a lot of money into my own recovery, but I think more than the money, it's like to actually create high quality, therapeutic, effective resources. Life is not free, right? And so like,
Thank you for saying this. I mean, this
it's
is
so important
we
to
know
understand. Yeah.
that like we can't create it for free. We know that if you're gonna do what you guys have done, and what some people that I'm wearing my Fight the New Drug shirt right here, it costs a lot of money. Fortify costs money. They're like,
I don't think people understand the
like
scale
a
of
lot
money
of
that
money.
it
And
takes.
so
Yeah.
to be able to do it for free, you're having to find money somewhere else, which is
Yes.
also a cost,
Right.
opportunity cost of time and energy and space. And I want to get rid of this notion. I like what you said. I think the research is even saying like you should charge, not even that it should be free, even if you can, because of this buy-in, because of this skin in the game.
It actually creates better I've read the research
Yes.
too. It creates better outcomes for
Yeah.
people, which is very interesting. Obviously, accessibility is huge to me. So to this date, like we offer scholarships where people reach out and they're like, hey, money is the barrier, and they communicate how serious they are. I'm like, let's help them out. Like
Which
we've
I
got
love.
kind of a
Yeah.
fund reserve to try to help them with that. But anyways, like there was the money question for us personally,
Yes,
but
I was
also
like,
as a
this
company.
is a huge pivoting point, right? You're
Yeah.
like, okay,
So we were like, should we raise money from investors, from venture
Yes.
capital, and make this maybe grow faster and bigger? So ultimately, I made the personal decision first. We had no investors. We had we had won a few competitions, small amounts of money, but nothing real legit in terms of like what we can sustain the business on or like pay ourselves. Like we did the math one time. We had put over 10,000 hours total into building Relay before we paid ourselves a single penny. And 10,000 hours is like a lot of hours, compared to if I had stayed at my other startup,
of course.
making what I was
Yeah.
making. But so I did go and start trying to raise some money, and we applied to this program in Silicon Valley in the Bay Area called Y Combinator. So Y Combinator is one of the earliest like incubators for startups, and they've funded really big companies like DoorDash and Dropbox and a bunch of other like very techie companies, but some big consumer ones too that they're like a very well-known investor, very reputable brand. And I think at the time that we applied, there had only been, I want to say it was single digits, like less than 10 companies in the state of Utah that had ever been accepted to Y Combinator's program. So every 6 months they have a batch and they accept a certain number of companies, and it's like a 1% acceptance rate. It's like more difficult to get into than Harvard and Stanford. And so we applied. actually at first in the winter, so we were still a few months out from graduating, and we didn't get in. And so we still had to kind of make this decision where like they didn't accept us into the program. They would invest $500,000 if we got accepted. And we didn't have anything else lined up. But I was like, I know that if I stopped relay now, I would be intentionally pushing the brake on something good.
Yes.
Like there was nothing signaling to me that people didn't want this. All the feedback was like, this is amazing. And by the way, you should like add these features, and there's all these things that like we would love to
Yes,
see to
and
make really better. Yeah, it was like I actually see like many years worth of things that we could do to make this an incredible platform. And so I just felt in my heart like, man, maybe this won't work out from like a personal, professional perspective, but I'd feel remiss if I didn't give this a full shot. So I told my co-founders, I'm like, I'm all in. Like I emailed the tech company where I had my job offer, and I was like, sorry guys, I'm not showing up for my start date. Like I reneged on my job offer and was all in on relay. And they followed suit quickly after that, which was really cool.
It's kind of so inspiring.
It was cool because we made that decision, and then like 2 weeks later we had applied again to Y Combinator for the summer, and we got in this time.
Oh, what a resilient story, right? Just keep going.
We kept going, and it was like we didn't know if like the funding was going to be there, but we made the decision anyways. It was the leap of faith.
I actually love that you guys made the decision before
I'm so
you
glad
got
that
in.
we did.
What a
So
testament of like, we made it and we didn't make it because we had a safety net. We
Right.
did it because we were in.
Yeah.
In on the concept and on each other.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was really important that was how it happened.
The timing,
for us.
yeah.
Yeah, it fueled a deeper sense of why we're doing this.
Okay. So
So-
then you're in.
Yeah, we went out to the Bay Area. This was still just kind of
Congratulations, by the way.
post-COVID. Oh, thank you. This was like post-COVID, so it wasn't like fully in person. Now they like encourage everyone to move out to the Bay Area. But we did like a little in-person thing with like masks on, and it was like it was okay. But now I feel jealous because we've had other friends go through Y Combinator since then, and they're getting like a really cool experience in person, and they have like the founders of Airbnb. I don't know if I mentioned was one of their early success stories. The companies that came out of Y Combinator, like the founders of Airbnb are like at Y Combinator telling their story, and I'm like, man, it would be so cool to have that. We flew out for like a weekend, and then we were back working kind of remotely again in the COVID kind of world. On now, okay, we have some funding. How do we grow this thing? And that kind of brings us to maybe this most recent chapter of Relay, which is we kind of have something that works, but how do we, like a few things, how do we go deeper to really solve this problem for people? Well, like how do we make it as easy as possible for people who are on the fence, who feel alone, to step into community, to step into rigorous honesty, to do that deeper work, to start to become aware of the core trauma and other pain that has contributed to the place where they feel stuck.
Yeah.
And
In
not
essence,
just
they're
get them
showing up because they have identified, or someone has identified that they have an addiction. I don't love this word, but we're using this word to like identify. But you guys are saying this is maybe what brought you here, but this isn't the root of the issue.
Right.
Let's figure that out.
Let's figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I love. Which is the nature of like therapy is this. People can show up however they want. The amount of times that someone shows up at my office, I work with teens and young adults, and there is a identified problem, and I'm asking them, how are you sleeping? And how are you feeling? And they're like looking at me like, the amount of times that this happens because people consider themselves the problem. Like, I'm a porn addict. I'm a gaming addict. I have an eating disorder. And I'm like, this thing is out here and this is not you, but like what's going on and what's contributing to that? Now that is hard. It's easier to say like, I have an addiction, even from a victim like response, right? I think it's harder to examine and look down, and you got to do it in spaces that you feel safe. You've got to do it in spaces where people have actually good information, right? Like all of the above. Okay, so
well, and that was kind of the next phase of how do we get good information into this experience. We realized that people didn't need an app; they needed like a more structured and guided program and community that had like some purpose behind it. We realized that some of the groups were doing amazing, but others were kind of like wandering a bit, like, we're here now, what do we do? And we're like, okay. So we started to work with some clinicians, some therapists to build out more structure to the program. So some content and some just basic education, and how do we help them build the skills together and individually to not just stop the addictive cycle, the unhealthy behavior, but to like become a more whole person. And so that was kind of a big focus of let's partner with more therapists. Let's partner with the people that I've already been like
Working with,
like we
yeah.
weren't trying to reinvent the wheel. We're like we're not going to come up with our own program here, so to speak. Like we're going to work with people that have some of the best, contexts already and have worked with people, through these issues. And it was really cool. I think I learned a lot, about myself in the last 5 years. To go back to my story, like I'm not realizing that I'm not relay either, even though I'm consumed with how to make this work, because I care so much about each person that comes into relay and
Right.
to our community. But as we've done this work to make relay a more comprehensive platform, I'm learning how much more stuff there is for me to figure out, which has been cool. I think realizing that my recovery journey hasn't been linear. Like I'm still almost peeling back some new layers in the last couple of years. Like for example, we started doing live meetings as an option for people. Now they start with kind of this asynchronous group chat where they can
Right.
stay kind of anonymous, and then maybe they start to go by their real first name or their real profile picture. So now we created the option where they can move into a live setting where we have peer facilitated meetings, and similar to 12 step, but really just creating an environment where they can share and flex into emotions in a
Mhm.
live setting. And we have, literature or content that we'll read and study together. And so it's been amazing, and people have loved it. But I think for me now, being, cause I had attended my first group like over 10 years ago
Yeah.
now. And I had kind of taken a break for a number of years while I was creating relay, but now over the last year and a half, I've run like hundreds of these meetings for our community. And I feel like I'm just being the recipient of all of this vulnerability and sharing and honestly courage. It's continually inspiring me to realize how these people, I know one of the questions that you sent me in thinking about our conversation today was things that I'd maybe learned from friends or people in my life. And I was thinking about that, and I realized a lot of the people that I'm learning the most from are these friends that I am making from relay and the
Yeah.
community. And in these meetings, I'm getting to know them over the weeks and months, and realizing how they're, I mean, actually some of the most cool and normal people you'd probably expect. Again, going back to this misconception of, well, if you struggle with X, maybe you look a certain way. But we have such a broad spectrum of people who are showing up at these meetings, especially, which I'm talking about the meetings because that's where I'm really feeling like I'm getting to know
Yeah.
on a
Yeah.
very deep level a lot of the stories from hundreds of people now in our community. And it's the stories of resilience, of willingness to step into discomfort, to do the deeper work, to self-examine, especially seeing a lot of these men and women, especially later on, 50s and 60s, not calling those people old,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Be
like
careful.
they the willingness to be humble and to say that, yeah, I'm willing to work on myself, even though I've been married for 30 years. And
Yeah.
to accept that I've created some harm in my relationship, and to hold space for that tension as she's working through her betrayal trauma. And I don't know what the outcome of our relationship is going to be, but to show up and put in the work because that's who I want to be is
I want to be,
showing
and
me so
also
much.
that's the kind of relationship I want to have, right?
Yeah.
Because part of the shame that's involved with addiction, just in general, is that it separates you from the person and people you love the most, right? Whether you know
Yep.
it or don't
Yeah.
know it, right?
Disconnect.
And it's causes a disconnect, right? So to be able to be a whole person, there's an outcome where that person just rejects you outright and they leave you, right?
Yeah.
And your wholeness is shown, but you lose that relationship, and sometimes you have to weigh that
Yeah.
out,
It's a
right?
scary outcome. Yeah.
There's opportunities where you show your whole self and that person digs in, right? Like they can't solve your problem anyway as the other person, right? They can support you, they can love you, they can be the part that makes the most sense for them, but I'm a big fan of they're not doing your work, right?
Yep.
Um anyway, this is okay, so one of the things that I just realized as I'm sitting here talking to you, are you familiar with Here Brotherhood?
No, I
Okay,
don't think
so
so.
that is a men's mental health group that a good friend of mine started with some other people, and I'm on the advisory board of that.
Oh, cool.
But the thing about it is, these men come and they go to these retreats and they have these things and they have these like I call belonging places, right? And then they leave and they go back to their homes, and we've often talked about how do they, and in
How do you
these,
stay
I
connected?
just want to say, in these many times people will share their unspeakable things. Many times it is addictions
Yeah.
that they haven't been able to share anywhere else, but they are received and loved. And then they go home, and I'm just thinking, what a great world relay meets here brotherhood, and I'm excited to like introduce this and know this. And
Oh, yeah.
but I'm thinking there's a
That's what I
lot of
thought about
other
too.
people.
Oh, well, I realized for me, I was only going to these groups myself. My therapist run groups on like Wednesday nights, once a week. So the other 6 days of the week, I think I was starting to realize this also led to relay. Like, how can I stay connected 7 days of the week? Like we had group chats sometimes, but it wasn't very structured. It wasn't like we had easy way to see how each other were doing. You kind of had to rely on guys to like come in there and say, hey everybody, like, how are you doing? Like, let's, stay connected. And it's difficult. It is
Yeah.
challenging.
Because even
We're
that
busy
person sometimes isn't going to do it all the time.
and they can't
They're
do it for everyone
back in
else. Yeah.
their problems and they feel shame and they don't want to come to the group and like,
Right.
yeah.
Yes. How do you stay connected between these moments where, yeah, we do step into connection, whether it's a retreat or to a meeting or something, you go back to your normal life all alone, right? Back to even if you have a family or whether you're single or you have a family, like the question I had been thinking a lot about is how do we make this journey not just about these brief moments of connection, but how do we make this continuous and integrated
And once
connection?
somebody has opened up, how do we give them a platform or a space to continue to be vulnerable, to create change? And I would also say to invite change, right? Because
Mm.
people in groups are all along the spectrum. Like I just entered,
Yeah.
or I am coming and being in this group and I'm 7 years, what people might say sober. Maybe you're not even 7 years sober. Maybe you like had problems and then you didn't have problems and now you have problems again,
Right.
right? Like in the spectrum of it. To me, the thing about group, and maybe you can talk about this from your perspective, is that like you get to play different roles at different times in your life in a group, right? Sometimes you
Totally.
need help and sometimes you're
You give
giving
help.
help, right?
Yeah. I think when we step into a group, a lot of the times it's how can I get help from these people? And I've actually seen this a lot within relay. People come into these teams and they expect others to welcome them, to create belonging for them. So I was also thinking about, because I love the premise of the podcast, like what are belonging places? What does belonging mean? And I've noticed that the people who come in to our groups, our teams, and they don't get what they want out of it, they're expecting others to create the belonging
Oh,
for them.
yes.
And I realized this is kind of similar, like when I start a new job or when I moved and I go to a new school, I kind of do want someone to come up to me at the lunch table and make me feel welcomed. And I think, just as human beings, we should all think about how can we take those opportunities to create belonging
For
for others.
sure.
But taking ownership for my own connection, my own belonging is interesting. So like I've realized that a lot of the people who are getting the most connection from their groups in relay, they're almost taking this sense of individual accountability where it doesn't matter if everyone in the group is actually responding to their messages super timely or super often. It's like, I'm going to choose to post a share. We call them shares, like raw, vulnerable, like kind of like if I do a journal entry about whatever's on my mind and on my heart, whatever I need to name and be honest about or process in real time. Maybe I type that up and I post it into my group. It actually doesn't matter if they come in and leave a like on it or like respond to it. It's my intentional choice to put it out into my
And
group
that is
environment.
therapeutic, just to get it out of your brain and heart
Oh,
and
totally.
down,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. Right.
In
I'm
and of
sure
itself.
you could explain a lot better than I could
Yeah.
all of the benefits of that. But I think from a belonging standpoint, I think it's almost surrendering. Like I'm not looking for validation. I'm not looking for everyone to kind of come in and attune to me.
External validation,
But
yeah.
I'm coming in and saying, I want to use my group. I'm choosing to not keep this isolated in my head. I'm putting it out into my support system where they can see it. Not like if they don't see it, then I'll feel rejected and withdraw back to isolation. It's really interesting. But
Like
yeah.
all of that you described is why we're doing the podcast, because I think that there are times and seasons when you need to be invited or belong to a group that you didn't create or do, like you ride the train. And there are times in life when you as an individual, you can do something no one else can do. You, Chandler, can do relay, and because of your story. Yes, your team. Awesome. We love your team too. But your story brought you to the place where when somebody asked you that, what we call in therapy, the magic wand, if you could do anything in your life, or if they gave you if you could build any app.
Yeah.
And your story brought you to the seat that said, this is the thing, right? That's something only you can contribute in the way that you then had your own experience. And so you're building the train and people are riding it. But while they're riding your train, they get to go and think about what that's doing and contribute to them and go build their own trains and their own spaces.
Yeah.
They get to build they get to work on their relationship with themselves. Yes, group is group, but it's really individual. That's why I love Relay, the
Yeah,
name. It's really
it is
individual
individual.
work, right?
Yeah.
It's individual belonging. You get to feel seen, and maybe you need it for a time and a season, and maybe you don't, right? And it's there for you to jump
Huh.
on and jump off. The hope, though, is that you get those root healings, like you get to heal things from the root, right?
Yeah.
So then it causes what I call generational change, right?
Yes. Ooh, we could get
Yeah.
into this, but that's actually like if I had to describe my vision for Relay, it actually hit me one day. It was really a spiritual thing where one of the guys in our meetings was sharing, and I've become kind of friends with him. Like I talk to him, I have him on text, and I know that he has kids who are kind of growing up. Like his oldest is at college, and he has kids that are still in high school, and I just saw in him like the change in the work that he was doing. I just knew that the impact wasn't just he was healing himself
Yes.
or even his marriage, but man, these kids are getting a different father. They're getting a different family environment. And specifically thinking about like his oldest son will be a father someday, maybe, right? And man, how is he going to be able to show up and be present and be emotionally available and just be a healthy version of himself because of the work that his dad did and that kid's kids and just the generational impact is
And you
that's
can
what
see
it's
me.
about.
There isn't anything more important, I think, of whew, um, like that's if I had a basic mission in life, it is to create belonging and connection so that people can change, but it's so that they can cause
Yeah.
generational healing, right? We talk a lot about in science about an epigenetics and like trauma coming down the line. And part of me is just like, I want to be in the generation that does healing
Mm,
generationally,
yeah.
right? Like, how do we, and it doesn't necessarily mean that people won't have interactions and problems with addiction. I think I wish we could be in a world where we alleviate that altogether. But I more care about like creating a world where we have enough connection and belonging and accountability that we will be choosing to use other healthy coping models rather than maladaptive, right?
Yeah.
That
Where we
because
learn how to meet our core needs of connection and
yes,
belonging in
that
better
because
ways.
I want to give that to myself and then I want to give that to my relationship and I want to give that to my children. I'm doing it for me. And what happens when you do it for you is it just spills out everywhere. We call it modeling, right? You're modeling it, but it can't help but like you said, he's a like that idea of he's a better father, he's a better husband.
I'm just thinking, like, even seeing your parent put that type of work in. Again, like I love and appreciate my parents, but I'm just thinking a lot of these. I'm speaking men because I run the men's groups,
Yeah.
but like a lot of these men view themselves as maybe failures in some ways. They feel like, well, I already have kids and I haven't been the type of father or husband or whatever that I've wanted to be. But realizing that it sounds cliche. There's obviously never a too late, but
Yeah.
the reality, I think actually there's a huge upside. It's not just like okay, you have a chance to save things. No, I think you have a chance for some upside of modeling what healing, what ownership, what deciding to like continue to grow and put in the work looks like at any age. That is inspired parenting. I think like
I couldn't
I'm
and
not an expert on parenting, but
yeah.
I personally just being a kid, a son, like I think of parents, I think there's nothing more inspiring. Like I don't want to see my parents be perfect and do all the right things for me. I want to see them be human and see them take ownership of their journey.
And I would
That's
pull it,
what's
yeah, I would
inspiring.
pull even outside of parents as like a lifelong single person. I would also say like um any there's a in the family systems module in like idea in therapy, there's this idea that in a system only one person has to change the
Mm,
system.
I
Ideally
love that.
you're the person. You can't change
Yeah.
anybody else, so
Well,
in your system you change and it impacts everything else around you for the good or the bad, right? But
yeah.
if we take that model, whether you're a parent or whether in
Yeah,
whatever
it
system you're
applies.
in,
Yeah.
right? If I choose to make a change, I
You can
invite
impact your system.
everybody
Yeah.
else to in some way change,
Mhm.
right? Again, for the good or the bad. But if I choose to invest in myself or be honest with myself or meet my relationships in an honest way, it can't help but like grow those relationships, connect those relationships.
Mm.
The irony of life is that we're so afraid to lose people that we hide our like unspeakable things, whatever they are, and that those people also have those. And so we're walking around and we're meeting each other and maybe they're even deep, right? Deep levels, but they're not the deepest levels, the deepest wells. The minute that you are able to stop and sort of bring your whole self to the table, it's a mirror to that person to also bring their whole selves. And there's just layers and layers of deeper relational opportunity there, right? To be seen wholly in all your
Mm,
imperfections and all your goodness and your greats. I
totally.
always say to people, like, I have really loud strengths and I have really loud weaknesses. And the people that love me just like see me as a combination of those. I'm
That's so
not like
beautiful.
the worst of my ADHD and I'm not the best of like, look at all the things I've created. I'm just me.
Yeah.
And because I've created a belonging place of people who know, I also have louds that are negative and positives. They sort of ride the wave with me. I'd much rather have people who see the totality of me and ride the wave with me than have to put on some kind of facade with certain people and certain things, right?
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. Talk to
Yeah.
me about your passion. Let's just let you wax eloquently a little bit on why connection, why group, why there's lots of ways to have done this. We've talked a little bit about it, but what are some things that you've noticed or when you said I really love the idea of the belonging place, anything else you want to share about
Yeah.
that?
I mean, I feel like to me, everything we were just talking about
Yeah.
is kind of the answer to
Yeah.
this. But I mean, I think the conviction for me has just grown. Like, I don't think we were put on this earth and that we were designed as human beings to bear these difficult, unspeakable things, right? The difficult parts of our life alone. I believe that we were put into these systems. Yeah, whatever your family system,
Yeah.
whatever your friend group, your community situation looks like. Um, where I would love culturally to see the world shift more towards not just, yeah, normalizing these conversations, but where we create environments in all of these different systems and areas where we can navigate the hard parts of life together rather than, I come out into the open and show my best face at work and show my best face at family reunions or whatever it is at church. And like, then I kind of am navigating these difficult sorrows alone,
Yeah.
um,
And everybody
inside my
around me
head.
thinks that I am the totality of the goodness that I show, right? You're like not approachable at that
Yeah, you're
level,
missing the
right?
other half of the equation. Yeah, it's not approachable, and I think
You've
you
actually
miss out on a depth
disconnected
of
people.
connection.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's it. Is like I think there's more beauty and connection to be had in life with vulnerability in the painful, broken parts.
You
I don't
had
know if
s-
that's the most eloquent way to
no,
put it, but
you had
yeah.
said it earlier. You were like, I it was so wild for me to hear you say this concept that I hadn't quite like, it's belonging. It's just so malleable. But you had said earlier that you found so much connection in your group, more than maybe in other places. This is a wild statement to say. It's a truth, but it's a wild statement to say because let's just say you have a great family who love you. You have a great friends who love you. You have a church situation. You have sports. You have lots of belonging places, right? So all things created equal, why would this group feel
Why would it
so
add something special?
yeah,
Yeah.
and why would it feel so you made that
That's
comment
the
just off
question.
off the cuff. I felt
Totally.
so seen. It's like where were you
Oh
not
no, I
seen?
like actually liked going to these groups. It wasn't like I
Yeah.
had to go to these groups. It's like I enjoyed it. It was cool. Like it
This is
was
the revolution, right? This is the thing that relay this is the what we call secret sauce in the business, right? That you're bringing to the table that sort of it's unique and not that the things that are building it are unique. I don't know, you said like we're using
yeah,
therapeutic stuff.
stuff
We're
that has
we're
been
using
figured out.
stuff that's been
Yeah.
figured out. However, you are sort of industry busting in the addiction world by saying we're using a connection model,
Yeah.
right? We're not necessarily using a knuckle white tight willpower or like sobriety is the only way to do it or any of these other sort of known um, entities that are out there, right? You're saying, hey, in essence, if I'm getting it right, you're saying the anecdote to addiction is connection,
Yeah,
which is
100%. I mean, there's the famous quote by Johann Hari that the opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, it's connection. And
yes.
early on, I was like, all right, we'll adopt that and make that like our mantra. It's really true. It's a great way to sum it up. But it is fascinating how it's similar to my story, I guess. But a lot of the people that have come into Relay, it's like they're kind of hesitant to say it, but they're like, I'm almost grateful that I've had this problem, this addiction, whatever. And they're kind of like, is that okay? Like, is it weird that I'm feeling that? Because I think they're realizing like I'm experiencing and maybe even more aware of the pain,
Mm,
more aware of the shortcomings or how deep the wounds go.
Yeah.
And it's heavy. Like, don't get me wrong. I think emotional pain is something we talk a lot about. When people come to our meetings, we have them post, like, there is some amount of like accountability in numbers. It's not, I think a lot of people say our meetings are not very focused on numbers, but one number we do have them post into the chat is, what's your emotional pain at today?
Mm.
You know, what are you carrying today? 0 being low emotional pain, just like at the hospital, that pain scale, and just getting them more in tune with the current, you know, their present and the past. So that pain definitely comes up, but I think this kind of realization a lot of them are having of like, I'm almost grateful for this, is the increase in feeling and noticing the beauty, the connection, the richness of life in their relationships, in their level of belonging. And I do think there's something unique. And I think a lot of these people are like, I'm actually creating unique friendships here, where it's not like I felt like I was lacking friends, although I think that's not uncommon in addiction, of like, just because of the isolation and the shame. Often I think there is a kind of lacking of
and some people with their
connection.
behaviors, they have just
Put other
ruined
people
their
away.
relationships
Totally.
because of their choices.
Totally. Right.
Their priority shifted to something besides people, right?
Exactly.
And so they lost those people in that process.
Yeah. But I think being able to come in and like have friendships that are founded on some of like the pain, but then you start to realize that it doesn't define, you know, and it's not like I'm just using these people to get better. It's now I have these people that already knew the ugliest parts of me from the get-go. So there's only like kind of upside potential in terms of feeling belonging, connection, acceptance. And I think that's really cool. Again, especially for these dudes who are like not used to talking about their feelings or having real close, intimate friendships with other men. That's a thing that I've become more like aware of like, especially among the men I'm seeing, they like really were never modeled like what attunement and connection and feelings, you know, looks like with other men, and feeling like they can have that together, and it's not some weird touchy-feely thing. It's just like
it's
motivating.
also really hard because lots of these men are married and they love their wives, but they also, it's hard to have this kind of a nuanced conversation with somebody who doesn't, it's not even intellectually know the problem, but doesn't know the problem. I'm pointing to my heart, right? It's not a lived experience. Nor do you want them to have that lived experience.
They're detached from themselves.
If I used a different like model, I would say like, when I was 19, I had a little brother who died tragically. He drowned. And I became part of an invisible club, I call it, which is siblings who've lost siblings, right? Or in a family who's lost, or just anybody who's lost someone that's very close to them. I would specifically say a family member, right? You never wanted to be in that club. But when I would meet people, and when I have met people specifically on my level that have lost a brother or a sibling, there is an unspoken language that I have with them, like a connection that nobody else really gets, right? Can people get grief? Yes. Can they get loss? Yes. There's something to be said about that kind of seeing, that kind of being seen, right? Like, I don't know your exact story of your sibling, and I don't relate to that exact. So like, that's how people come in with addictions or come in with these pain points, right? They don't have the exact same story, but it's a close enough story to be seen in your shame and in your whatever brought you there. That's why I think the belonging is so different and strong, right? It doesn't take the place of your wife or your kids, but it is like, and then from what you learn, right? From what you learned in that group that models back to you, then you can go do that. You can go talk to your wife. You can go talk to your siblings. You can go, it's sort of like you figure out how to build those muscles. It's almost like you're going to the gym, right?
100%. Yeah, I use that analogy. Yeah, exactly. It is emotional weightlifting.
Yeah.
I think there's these muscles that I don't know if atrophied is even a good word, because it's like maybe we didn't ever have them or learn how to use them.
Never built them
in the first place. Yeah.
And so you're giving people an opportunity to work these muscles. And yes, it's good for them here. But the idea, right, isn't that they're going to like, that this is going to create generational change, right? They're going to take those muscles they've emotionally built, bring it out to their families and things. Well, I love Relay. I will post about it. People, please check it out, share it. I'm going to use a brief opportunity to talk about Fight too, in the same Fight for this. Just briefly, I mentioned I was wearing my shirt that says Fight for Love. I think Relay, Fight, we're like all about love, right? We're not necessarily.
That's the goal.
Yeah, we're pro relationships. We're pro being seen. And you are filling a need in group. Fight's filling an education need. Fight's part of phase, which is phase is prevention and healing against sexual exploitation. We know that pornography is in relation to all this darkness that I'm not going to go into on this podcast, but they're interconnected. So another thing that I want to say, thank you to you, Chandler and Relay, is in this generational healing. There's a lot of sexual abuse. There's a lot of sexual proclivities. Like pornography is just one thing in this world, right?
Totally.
That people encounter or involved in. And we want to link arms with people who are fighting the fight, right? Like Fight the New Drug is actually, that's the name. But whenever I can invite someone to the table who's like linking arms in this like fight for love, right? Fight for generations. I just can't like be more excited. Like I said, I'm excited to connect, Relay, to hear brotherhood. I'm excited to see your guys' like growth, because you guys are adding as you go, right? You're adding betrayal, and you're adding some other areas of what we would call addiction. I'm calling them process addiction.
Yeah.
So process addictions are pornography is a process addiction. Eating disorders are a process, gambling. Lots of times when people think of addictions, they're thinking of substance, right? And this is one of the other things I really want to like spell out for people when they're coming to Relay, right? We're not talking specifically about one addiction, though you have pretty heavy-handedly said, here's a door for,
again, it's not a porn problem. It's like,
pain
how have we learned to cope with various behaviors?
Yeah. Okay. 2 more questions. If you were to let go of Relay, meaning it lives in the world, but you're not connected to it,
what would I do?
What would you do?
Oh man, this is kind of a fun question. It's like the blank slate again.
It
I haven't had a blank slate for 5 years.
The sit down with the professor and say, if you could create an app from scratch, experience right here on The Belonging Place.
You know, I've actually thought a lot about this, because as I'm building a startup, like, there's the mission side to it that like is my why. But then there's also just the startup component that's tiring. And I'm like, man, I don't know how many years I can do this. At some point, I probably will move to something else. I won't get into it, but I've been in the hospital for a number of reasons in the last few years. Nothing crazy. I'm okay. But I've just been thinking a lot about healthcare and the problems in our healthcare system, and just similar inefficiencies for, like, we're talking about behavioral health and people like getting easier access to help address the real underlying issues. And I've just been frustrated at, like, I mean, the like cost structure inefficiencies and like the problems, and just like we won't get into the like the big macro picture. Obviously, we all know
live in the big background picture, for example, as a mental health person. So like,
there's so much. And even basically, I would go deeper into healthcare, whether it's on the physical side or just like how do we help. Like, honestly, my big dream, I don't know if I'll ever pursue this. I would love to create a hospital from scratch, actually, and think about what should a hospital look like in 20, 50 years even. Like, what does innovation look like to enable providers to provide better care, to like reduce all the inefficiencies, and just to help
break
patients,
down the barriers,
to help people.
right? We have these big gaps between insurance and this, and so many. I kind of love the idea of bringing the model that you just said to lower the barriers. Fight wanted to really lower the barriers of entry for teens, because they realized that, like, if they didn't make it free for teens, a kid had to get a parent's credit card, and that meant they had to have a conversation, and the kids weren't really have the conversations. And so they were like, how can we create a model not to undermine parents, but to have kids who have too much shame to talk to their parents to take the first step, right? I kind of love this.
And I have no idea
as
what
a
it would
concept.
look like. No idea.
How do we
like, what
lower
I'm actually,
the barriers?
I just think like the rate of innovation isn't fast enough in healthcare. And I just, from an entrepreneurial lens, I would love to continue to help in whatever form that health means. So I have family members and some chronic conditions, and so I'm like, even how do we become more aware and recognize and diagnose issues a lot earlier, not like after problems have already been happening for a long time. So I don't know. I'm really drawn to health. I realize that health is everything. And like when we have health, mental health, relational health, physical health, it allows us to fully live, to enjoy the things that really matter.
Yeah, it gives us freedom, right? Like, okay, my last question is this. You have a 1-year-old. His name is Sam. And
he's really cute, by the way. He just started walking a week ago. So
And you said named after the Bible.
yes,
And but
yeah.
any story behind that name specifically, or just like the name, or
Well, my wife suggested the name, and it resonated with me because she's like, I looked it up, and I don't know if you were to Google this, so this is actually the direct translation, but she said it means like a song to God, or like
oh
a
yeah,
little like praise to like look upward. And that was kind of what it symbolized to us, is like through the pain, through the tough things of life, um, this reminder that God is good, this reminder that there's beauty, this reminder that even in the darkest, storms, like there's something to have hope for and to look up. And
I love that.
yeah, that
Okay, so
was
this is the question: 5 years from now, 'cause he'll be 5, right? Or you could
oh
even say
goodness.
10 years from now,
Yeah.
he'll be 10, right? 17 from years from now, he's a senior in high school, which is wild. What are the seeds that you want to plant today
Mm.
or in the next couple years that will help grow or invite your son to grow in the way that you want as a father,
Yeah. And
as a
everything
husband?
everything we've talked about, I've been thinking a lot about that in this transition to being a father. When I was like first like holding him and looking into his eyes, and like as he's grown a little bit older and starting to interact a lot more, like when he just looks at me, like I see this little reflection of the little boy within me. And when I think about this whole journey I've been on to learn to meet my own needs in healthier ways, I just want to be able to, like, the seeds I want to plant are to like be able to help him feel connected, to feel fully seen, to feel fully loved. And I know I talk about this with my wife, like we are going to make mistakes. There will be brokenness in our relationship. There will be rupture that will need repair. And that is being human.
Human.
That is being
Actually
fallible.
necessary,
And
right? That's how you
yes,
grow resilience.
yes,
That's
yes.
how your muscles grow. That's
Totally. Yeah. It's like that will happen, but I want to be able to show up in a way that helps him know that like that connection with him is what I care about, like more than his performance or more than his, whatever. Like, I think you did a good job in trying to help me dig beneath, like, okay, I'm not relay, I'm not these other things, but like at a person's core, especially with my son, with my family, like I just want to help them feel seen, just like the way that I'm learning to do that in my own recovery journey.
yeah, and I think it's important to model that you aren't those things, right? These are
Yeah.
things we produce.
Well, and I've thought about it.
They're
I've gone on
good.
these podcasts
Yeah.
talking about my story. I'm like, what does that even signal to my kids? If you're listening to this in 17 years, my son, and
Yeah.
I think what I like the message that I want to know is like my dad, like for him to say, like my
Yeah.
dad was willing and comfortable to be open about some of the hardest parts of his life to be able to help others.
Yeah.
I'm like, I can own that. I want
Yeah.
to own that.
And that's an invitation,
Yeah.
right? I said that was my last, but I actually have one more. Can you, and this might be too big to say in a short amount of time, so maybe we need the cliff notes of this, but can you talk to us a little bit about the role that Jade has played in
Mm.
this process for you? Jade being your wife, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
When I first, it was before relay, our relationship started, so she was a part of the entire relay journey. I opened up to her about my struggle, and I was only, I think, around 30 days sobriety. Like I was still like actively working through my process. And um she helped me, like I think the theme was like seeing things as they really are, and from a spiritual level seeking that divine help to like give me a new perspective. Because like she was like, how do I reconcile this information with this guy that I'd becoming to know and like love? Like, are they the same person? How do I fit this into my understanding of our relationship, of him and what I love about him?
And
and
the
and
impact it will have on
the
me
impact, yeah,
or
the impact.
does.
And so it was a total, like, her example of surrendering her mindset, surrendering her natural fears, her thought process, how like she was trying to connect the dots and say, God, give me a different perspective. Like, not help me make sense of the dots, but like just show me how you see Chandler. Show me how you see this problem. Like, and I think it was a big deal for her, and like it is for a lot of partners, dealing with any form of betrayal with sexual acting out. And I think that it hasn't been necessarily a clear, clean, rocky or rock free journey for us in our relationship. Like I've still had some struggles even since we've been married, but I think in our relationship, the way that she's just tried to see things from a bigger perspective and to realize like it's not a behavior, it's not, whatever is the problem. It's not me that's the problem.
Yeah.
It's there's some deeper thing and we can work together as a team
And
to
you're
do
not
this.
only that thing.
Yes,
You're
exactly.
a whole part of
Totally.
like you, the good, and the thing that I'm sure she fell in love with, and the person that you are, right? I'm guessing she's a reflection back of that. Like she loves all
Totally.
of you, right? This part of you that you're working on, she also loves that you're willing to work on it, right? But
I
I'm
think that's it.
guessing,
Yeah, I think just the willingness to work on it. And with relay, she's always been probably a bigger believer than I have. Like when I've had my pendulum swings of like, oh man, like I don't know if this is gonna work or if I can do this. She's always like basically like gives me a nice slap upside the head and is like, don't lose focus. Like obviously there's a lot of things going right. And so no, it's been so helpful to have somebody that also just like sees the bigger vision for what I'm trying to do in terms of helping others and create a platform for more people to have that
yeah.
change, that generational change.
I want to ask you about Psalm and Jade because it's just like it's your personal story, but it's a representation of lots of people out there, right? Lots of spouses, lots of men and women struggling with all kinds of pain points. I love that you call it that.
Yeah,
I wish we could make it synonymous with addiction. I think we have to say addiction so people know what the thing is. I have like a very jarring response to that word.
I agree. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
do I also think that like there is something to be said about this idea? Sometimes I talk about having a hijacked brain. There is something to be said about needing some kind of an intervention. You can't just willpower your way out of addiction. So the combination is, I'm a therapist, so I'm biased, but it's some way to help relieve pressure of that thing. So some kind of like not doing it, right? So whether we call it sobriety in the world that I was at Telos, we would just call it a detox, but most of ours was screen detox.
Mm.
It was like getting away from the thing,
Yeah.
right? You're not ever going to be able to not eat if you have an eating disorder or not interact with screens. Like we know this. It isn't it's building a healthy relationship with it. It's using it in a right way,
Yeah.
right?
It's not like chopping off some limb, chopping off a part of
Yes.
us.
Or it's a replacing. What were you getting out of this, and how can we get it better here?
Yeah.
And if you can't replace it here, like you said, finding the pain point. But I just love that your openness and willingness to like share your story, but even more, I love that you're building and built a train that people can ride on. I mean, for me, like I think that's amazing. I also love that you're sometimes willing to get off the train and stand behind it and look at it and examine it, and is it right for me? And I want to like blow wind in your sails to continue to do that, and like give yourself permission to build another train if you want, and to blow out into the world. I think that we each have gifts and things that we can contribute in our own way, and I'm excited to see, Chandler, what
I
like
appreciate it.
you're like young in your journey, so I'm excited to see
Thank
like
you.
how you grow, and that might just be with relay, but what we know you're going to grow is in your relationship with your wife and kids. And yeah, so everybody check out Relay. I think it's joinrelay.com.
Joinrelay.app.
Oh, .app. And there's
.com
also
wasn't
yes,
available.
.app. And there's also, you can just get the app.
Yeah.
And you can also check out, Chandler also is on Fights, I think twice now, right? Consider Before Consuming in like 2022. And then recently, I think you said?
Yes. When was it? The end of 2024. We actually had a few members from the relay community come on and we did a panel along with one of the therapists we work with.
This
and
is so awesome.
We just had a discussion about, what healing has been like. It was kind of a cool window into what group feels like.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's on Consider Before Consuming. And we're an official partner with Fight the New Drug too, as a resource for people. And so yeah, we're just here to help.
We're teaming up. We're linking arms.
Yes.
Again, thank you so much. I want to put the last emphasis on the table. One of my most exciting things about sitting with you, I think you too, is that we are living in this space in the world. There's a changing, I think, happening in the mental health world with the more neuroscience and the more stuff that we're finding out. And we're finding out that some of the old models don't fit as well as people think that they did. I like that you're like willing to jump in there. I want to be in there. I know like Clay.
It's exciting.
Clay is all about that. He's with Impact Suite. Jacob Huss is doing that. There's a lot of people that are, we've got a lot of people who are doing mindfulness. We've got a lot of people who are doing yoga. We've got a lot of people who are doing psychosomatic. We've got, Bustle who's doing trauma and
I
on
love
the
trauma,
body.
trauma work. Yeah.
And this, to me, this is the new, it's not new, but it's newer, exciting stuff that says, I'm going to just end with what you said, that like, if we can heal the pain points through connection and belonging, I think we're going to find this is a longer lasting healing than other things that we've done. So,
Amen.
yeah.
Love it. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thanks, Chandler.